Hey everybody, welcome to Anime Stroganoff. I'm Lilith.
And I am Eli. And today we will be talking about Girls und Panzer. Among some other things.
Of course, it's an Eli episode, so yeah. Talking about a bunch of random stuff that's not necessarily related to whatever we're supposed to be talking about is pretty standard for you.
Just rein me in if I ever start ranting about the Germans, the French, or the Italians.
Yeah, that makes sense. Not a problem.
Alright. So, Girls und Panzer came out in fall 2012. Studio Actus. And first off, back in the day. Alright, back in the day before I watched like a ton of anime or any anime, like I just occasionally see like mentions of Girls und Panzer on TV tropes just all over the place. And so it's kind of stuck in my head. Like, oh, this must be a thing that people watch a lot of. And then I went and suddenly, started watching anime and started watching a whole lot more anime. I just sort of remembered, like, hey, Girls und Panzer is a thing that a lot of people really enjoy. I should go check it out. Well, as it turns out, it's not that Girls und Panzer is like super huge. It's not that it's not huge, but it's not small. It's not big either. It is moderately successful. It just has an incredibly vocal and active community. They will not shut up. They are everywhere.
Oh, so it's like Symphogear then.
But by Studio Octus, I believe I mentioned that. This is kind of Octus's cash. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that studio right or not. I don't care. This is like their cash cow. So the first season of Girls und Panzer came out in 2012. Since then, it is currently, as of recording, 2021. They have released 3 other projects, not including Princess Principal, which they collabed with, at least the first season, with Studio 3HC. They've done 3 other things. For 9 years, they've been doing nothing but Girls und Panzer.
Well, hey, if you're doing something right.
Yeah, if you're doing something right. So Girls und Panzer, I started watching, and first minute when roughly I deliberately didn't watch Girls und Panzer or the other one topic of this episode beforehand, because like I said, they've been pumping Girls und Panzer stuff out for 9 years, so there's a lot of it. So I could not have physically done that. And B, I just kind of want to see how good things have stuck in my memory. But so first minute, we have, it was pretty anime. Just got a bunch of, Japanese schoolgirls laying around in tanks. Pretty anime, pretty normal stuff. They're driving, it's POV shot. I'm like, alright, this is very strange. And they start shooting at each other. I'm like, okay, that's strange. Then a shot gets fired, and it gets like a POV tracking shot right at some girl's face. Smash to black, and then start playing something else. Very effective way of getting me on board, if only because I'm like, okay, did she just die? Did some poor Japanese schoolgirl get her head splattered across a mountainside? Especially since when we cut back, it's like she just wakes up was it a dream, or was it a flash forward, or yeah, so a very effective opening. Makes you ask you the question of what the heck just happened to this strange orange-haired girl? And then they eventually answer, and so on and so forth. But Girls und Panzer, as a brief overview, it takes place in some sort of strange alternate universe where there are two things strange about this alternate universe. One, tanks, the art of armored warfare, is considered a sport, and it's considered a traditionally female sport. So you have, in the same vein as you would have like a high school softball team or something, you have high school tank teams. So you have, again, random Japanese schoolgirls climbing into World War II vintage tanks to shoot at each other. The second strange thing about this universe is that for some reason, like dating back to ancient Rome, it's been tradition for countries to build schools out of ships. So Urai is the school of the protagonists. It is a 7-mile long aircraft carrier.
It's got a whole town on it.
They literally built an entire school town on an aircraft carrier. And they're not like they're not the only school. No, this is a standard thing that everyone in the world does. They like the Japanese, like all the schools, funnily enough, they're all like themed off of like various things. So you have like the American school and the Italian school and the Russian school and the German school. They're all Japanese. Like there's kind of like the whole thing of like, oh, it's like preparing students for like college abroad and exchange trips and everything, but they're all Japanese. Except for like some of the ones in the Russian school, they're actually like Russian. One of them may or may not be a spy for the Kremlin. So we're just gonna get out of the way right quick. Girls on Panzer is a very light and happy show, despite the main character, Miho, having horrible, crippling PTSD regarding, people shooting at each other and almost dying in the process. She says, like, oh, it's incredibly rare for someone to be killed in one of these matches. It was like some bullshit about like the computers and like safe simunitions and like layers of carbon fiber armor put into the tanks. And my response to that is, one, you say rarely, not never. Two, you watched like 5 people almost drown. And 3, that KV-2 fired a howitzer shell that wiped out an entire floor of a hotel. I don't want to know what would have happened if that would, like, I don't care what level of carbon fiber you have in your tank. That much high explosives is going to just turn, you're going to get 16-year-old soup. That's what you're going to get.
Oh, God. Technically, I think it's more 17-year-old soup, but semantics.
No, Miho is 16.
Oh, she is? Okay, never mind then. I retract my statement. Well, maybe for some of the other students, though.
She's a second year at the start, and then like over time.
Wait, but we're talking about Japanese schools, right?
Yes.
Those are
She's a young second year. So she's on, like, because, like, 16, 17.
Okay, so it's like she's going to turn 17 during the school year? Okay,
yes.
Never mind. All complaints retracted, as usual.
Like, the freshmen are all, like, 15, so 15, 16. There's, but, yeah, there's the inevitable, dark alternate timelines that people joke about. Every fandom has, like, the dark alternate timeline that people joke about, except for Girls Last Tour, because Girls Last Tour is the dark alternate timeline, but that's not the topic of discussion. Girls in Panzer, I suppose, is just very easy because they have an incredibly flimsy excuse for why it's, like, perfectly safe and why you can be like, oh, yeah, this is fun and enjoyable. This is, like, held up by string and bubblegum. Like, there's the relatively famous Saki. She's one of the characters. Her name's not particularly important. Is like a time traveler or planeswalker, where she comes from like the dark alternate universe, and that's why she's 95% of the time staring off into space, looking completely stunned out. Just because she's like, I watched you beat her to death with her own spleen. Then, of course, there's TK, which, for the sake of my soul, I have not read. I do not regret that decision. That is the dark alternate timeline of the dark alternate timelines of Girls in Panzer. And we will say...
Yeah, we'll leave it there.
We will say no more. But, Girls in Panzer kinda has a reputation for playing fast and loose with the laws of physics. Which... I actually, like, thinking about it for this, I realized... Like, yes, but, like, the first season was somewhat grounded. I say somewhat, like, when you drift, like, in the first season, when they try and drift a tank, they're, like, they shred their tracks. The tank's not going anywhere once they drift the thing. But, once you hit the movie, Girls in Panzer turns into the show slash movie slash franchise, where you can ramp a tank off another tank to shoot down the barrel of a third tank, where you can put a tank on the back of another tank to yeet the tank into position, and where your tank can have its treads blown off. You whip a steering wheel out of nowhere, plug it in, start driving it like a race car. Then you get half the road wheels shot off. Then you're still driving it on one set of wheels on one side of the vehicle. All while someone's playing some strange Finnish instrument. And all those happened within 5 minutes of each other.
Good times.
Good times. Like, the main series is placed, like, somewhat fast and loose with physics. The movies where they turn things up to 11. And, like, the movie's the one where they have the tiger, and they have the buttons on the tiger, where one's labeled VTOL and the other one's labeled stealth mode. They never press either of those buttons, but they push it, and then the boost activates, and they start going, yes, ride our majestic prince. They put a supercharger in their tiger. It's also what taught me that tigers are hybrids. That's right. The Germans made a hybrid tank. Because why not? Girls in Panzer, here's where we're going to probably get into the meat of the meat of the episode. It relies extremely heavily off of the characters. There, you have a kooky, wacky cast of characters. You have the freshmen. Saki's one of them. She's great. Mostly, again, because she just spends all the time staring off into space. I like to play the game, what is Saki doing in the background? But you have the freshmen, you have the volleyball club, who, yes, they like, dress for a volleyball team in their tank. You have the weird, like, military otakus who, like, bow down in the direction of Finland 5 times a day for prayers. And, like, the one person's like, I am the reincarnation of Erwin Rommel. You have the mechanics team who, again, they apparently installed a button labeled VTOL in their tiger tank. They have, the student council team, who is just 3 people, so they're in, like, the lightest tank they have. And also, they apparently hired the person with the worst eyesight to be the gunner. She hits one thing in, like, the entire show, in the entire series. She hits one thing. She didn't even hit the thing she was aiming at. One time, she manages to hit something, and it wasn't even the thing she was aiming at. You've got the main characters. Miho, Yukari, Sori, can't pronounce her name. Not Catherine. The one that eats a lot. And oh yeah, Mako, the one that's sleepy all the time. Except for that one time she wasn't. You've got the Student Moral Council's team. There's all the other teams from all the other schools. This show basically relies on there is a character somewhere, if even for only a split second that they're on screen, that you will like.
So it's Star Wars then.
Kind of. There's the British, who they got like Darjeeling and Assam and Rosehip and Orange Beak. Orange Beak is the best. You've got the Russians with Clara and
Katyusha.
Katyusha, yes, and Nona, yes. Katyusha, who is basically reincarnated Lolly Stalin.
You're not wrong.
I'm not wrong. She's 18. She's 4'2". I'm pretty sure she is legitimately the shortest anime character I've seen who wasn't an actual child. She also likes to scream at how she'll have people purged. Like I said, Lolly Stalin. There's the Finnish team, who basically just keeps robbing people. You've got the American team, who, I mean, they're Americans. They're big. They eat a lot. They're loud. They're annoying. Also, again, all of these people are Japanese. It's like they just sort of decided, hey, let's just pretend to be Americans and go with it. You got the German team, who, you got Erica, you have Miho's sister. Miho used to be on that school. Then, backstory happened, horrific trauma, her mom's a total bitch. Yeah, that kicks off the main plot. That's not important. There's the Italians, who are all offensively Italian. There's the Japanese school, who you'd think that there wouldn't be a Japanese school because they're already Japanese, but no, they take they're like Japanese World War II to the max, charge headfirst screaming bonsai.
And we'll remind you, they are in tanks.
They are in
guns.
Tanks. Yes.
They always die.
It is truly hilarious. You got the there's so many other teams. There's one based on Poland. There's one based on Spain. There's actually three French ones. There were three French ones. Now there's only two French ones. Don't ask what happened to the third one. French things happened. Yeah, the plot of Girls in Panzer is basically literally just an excuse plot. It's like the standard sports anime plot of oh no, our school's gonna be shut down unless we can win the big tournament to prove that our school deserves to not be shut down. Literally 50% of high school sports movies in America and just 50% of sports anime in Japan. Yeah, it's the same plot. Literally that.
But this time with tanks.
Except this time it's with tanks. The show takes an inordinate amount of piss. The movie is literally the exact same plot. Literally the exact same plot. It's sort of hey, so remember how we fought the great whole tournament arc thing to avoid having our school shut down? Yeah, our school's getting shut down anyway. Apparently random wager death matches with the dude running the school program aren't legally binding. So
Who'd have
all right,
thought?
you know what we do? How about we sign a legally binding contract to have another tank death tournament? What could possibly go wrong? But in the movie, I'll get into the movie in a little bit, but no, I'll get into the movie now, because I don't really feel like we're gonna have a good segue into it. The movie is, ironically enough, where Girls in Panzer went from good to actually pretty great, because it's Girls in Panzer, more of it, but even more of it. Like I said, they dialed it up to 11 with just, like, completely disregarding the laws of physics. Everyone's drifting their tanks now. Someone skips a tank across a pond of water like it's a stone. Someone, again, the movies where they decide to go from taking the piss to getting the fire engine and basically saying, all right, guys, don't open your mouths. I say all this because Girls in Panzer sort of like inherently relies on spectacle to draw you in. The first thing the show basically says is, all right, hey, want to see what it would be like for a 16-year-old girl to have a narrow mist of a 75mm shell nearly take her head off? Like, you ever seen the movie Fury? Like, people have memed that scene with the dude getting his head taken off from a stray tank shell into Girls in Panzer so many times. It lures you in, people drifting tanks, just the idea of, hey, let's have random tank battles in the middle of cities because it's fun. Don't worry, the insurance will totally cover it. Just don't think about it. But, it's the characters that keep you returning. So there's Girls in Panzer. Girls in Panzer had the Anzio War episode, it literally takes place in the middle of the series, but it kind of would have killed the pacing if they put it there. So they cut it out and left it as a bonus. Then there's Der Film, Girls in Panzer Der Film. Gratuitous, terrible, terrible German is everywhere in this. Which is Girls in Panzer, but more, but extra. Then there's Das Finale, which is not the end of Girls in Panzer, it's the end of, like, the current character storylines, more or less. I'm gonna segue real quick into the second topic of this, High School Fleet. High School Fleet came out in 2016 from Production IMS, which is unfortunately no longer with us.
A salute a salute or just like
I'd like a salute to them, but they did, yeah. They did the sequel to Date A Live.
Which one? 2 or 3?
The second one. They did the second one.
Okay, they did Date A Live 2.
Yeah.
Okay, but they didn't do 3.
No.
Interesting. Good to know.
They did Gotta Be the Twin Tail.
Wait, they did?
Yeah.
Sweet Jesus.
They did. They've basically done very, very little. They were active starting in 2013, and they did their last thing in 2018. They went bankrupt. So 5 years. They had 5 years.
5 tumultuous years. We'll go ahead and give them a salute.
Tumultuous is the word I would use. They basically, and all this is entirely speculative, because it's not exactly like the studio's around to answer questions anymore. But they basically said, like, hey, what if we did Girls in Panzer, but we can't do it with tanks because that idea's taken. What if we do it with ships on the ocean? Thus began High School Fleet, which takes place in some sort of strange alternate universe where Japan went mining something or another. It doesn't matter. They accidentally sank the country. Yeah, Japan accidentally sank itself into the ocean.
Hey, just like in that Japan Sinks thing.
Yeah, just like in Japan Sinks, except like in like the early 1900s or late 1890s, something like that. This takes place in the relatively modern day. Oh, also, this is actually quite important for High School Fleet. They never invented heavier than air flight in this universe. Somehow. which is basically the excuse for why everyone's running around in like old school warships instead of like just having an aircraft carrier demolish things from 500 miles away. But high school fleet in Japan, they're like, okay, so now we have to like live on the ocean now and become ocean people, like build ocean habitats and like what little coastline we have that survived to form even tinier islands. We need to have like a huge navy to like do navy stuff. Don't know where they got like the industry for all this, but doesn't matter. Don't think about it. It's like the same rules as Girls in Panzer. Just don't think about it. So they decided to build a massive navy, but like we need to like let everyone know this is a navy of peace, a navy of peace. So they made it. All the ships are crewed exclusively by women. They call themselves the Blue Mermaids. But completely ignore why Japan in this era of peace decided to build 4 Yamato class super battleships. Don't worry about it. But so you it's one of those things that's incredibly concerning the more you look at it. For increasing number of reasons, but again, Girls in Panzer rules just don't think about it. Their vision is based on movement. Don't move, don't think about it, and it can't hurt you. So you have a girl named Akeno. I had to look that up. Who she and some other characters, they like start their careers as cadets in like Navy high school to become Blue Mermaids and, you know, protect the peace. And then they're framed for something. It literally doesn't even particularly make sense in universe. Because like a hamster got dredged up from the ocean floor and started spreading some sort of like alien hate plague. And then they had to run around in their little tin can of a destroyer to like prevent the Musashi, one of said Yamato class battleships, for you people who don't know a lot about battleships, from just like shelling the hell out of what's left of the Japanese mainland. Because, you know, totally needed those 18-inch guns. It's just describing the plot makes me want to just like, makes my brain want to dribble out of my ears. There's like some sort of hate plague running around that's like gonna like cause everyone to like go full rage virus and try and kill each other. But it's also apparently deactivated by seawater, which you'd think would be a real easy fix, considering that all the infectees are confined to ships on the water. But, you know, no. Anyway, the destroyer, the Harakaze, the ship is infinitely more interesting than any of the characters in the show. Saves the day, yay! Also teaming up with like a German pocket battleship and some other stuff. The plot doesn't make sense. I brought up High School Fleet because it's basically Girls in Panzer. We can do it too, guys. But it goes to show like my point with Girls in Panzer. Girls in Panzer in that it draws you in with the spectacle, but it keeps you because of the characters. Because High School Fleet, like the fights are fairly interesting. They're equally as nonsense physics wise. I don't think it's fairly realistic for a destroyer to shoot 16-inch naval shells out of the air with its main gun. They also play even just as fast and loose with the whole like, oh, it's totally okay. Like there's like carbon fiber in airbags in the ship. That's why no one dies. Except being a naval ship, I can, by the thinnest stretch of disbelief, believe that firing like a World War II vintage, like 3-inch gun, or like 88mm gun, 90mm gun, whatever, can't penetrate like some fancy dancy carbon fiber armor. I have infinitely less ability to believe that airbags and like just carbon, they never even like try and justify it. It's just like, oh, the carbon held up, can stop again like 6-inch, 8-inch, like 16-inch, 18-inch artillery shells. These things that weigh several tons and could literally, if it just fell on someone, could squash them flat. But yeah, the fights are vaguely interesting. The characters are completely boring as hell. I was about to say, you watched High School Fleet most of the way through with me.
Yeah, I watched a good portion of it with you.
You watched like the first 8 episodes.
Yeah. From what I remember, most of the characters are like the generic, stereotypical moe type sports anime characters.
Yes.
You got the Genki one, you got the like super sad one, you got the serious one.
There's the one girl. This is, to my memory, there's the main character. There's the other main character who's like cursed. Literally, like a gypsy put a curse on her family. Like level cursed. There's the one girl who really likes explosions and gets way too excited to be allowed to fire off a full spread of torpedoes at things. That's another thing. I don't know if they like use modern torpedoes. I would certainly hope they do. But if they're using like Japanese vintage torpedoes from like World War II, from their like vaguely World War II-esque destroyer, those things use pure oxygen as propulsion. A single fragment will turn their destroyer into a several mile wide like debris field. Just another reason why I'm like, yeah, I don't entirely believe that they would survive this. But there's the helmsman, who is incredibly cowardly. That's her entire character.
I suppose for most of the characters, you could just say a single word and that's their entire character.
There's also the German one, who is German. I'm fairly certain that's her entire character. She's German.
Further proving my point.
She likes gangster movies. She has 2 character traits. She's German. She likes Japanese gangster movies.
Are you sure she's not the main character?
No. But it's one of those things where Girls in Panzer, at first when writing this, I almost thought like, hey, wait a minute. It seems almost like all the characters in Girls in Panzer are almost like superficially like characterized, and that they're all like weirdly quirky, but they never ever seem to have anything else. But I realized that in terms of screen time, the how many dozens or hundreds of characters, not hundreds, dozens of characters that they have to characterize. Like, they characterize the main like 5, and then everyone else gets just like gets like a little bit of time to be characterized, and they leave it to the spin-offs, which kind of works. I don't want to say that High School Fleet needed spin-offs in order to be good. It did. High School Fleet was more or less doomed from the start. But like Orange Pico, I said she is the best. She speaks like what, 4-5 lines of dialogue in like the main series proper.
Yeah, something like that.
Something like that, yeah. What made me realize that, or what made Orange Pico so great is just her sort of less like, oh, yeah, totally, Darjeeling, yeah, no, you're right, that saying totally makes sense. This would all make sense if you watch the show. I'm not going to get into it. I could talk about Girls in Panzer for hours. In one of the spin-off mangas, Darjeeling, her boss, is being Darjeeling, which is to say having little concept of personal space what constitutes proper public and displays of affection, and being flamingly homosexual. And so that's Darjeeling. She's just like, again, just like, I would say flirting, say more harassing Pico with the Psalm. And then her and Assam are fighting over which of them loves Pico more. So basically decide to have a tug of war with her. Under the idea of when she like goes, "Oh, stop, you're hurting me." Whoever lets go first is the one who truly loves her. So they go to do their little tug of war, except they can't budge her an inch. And it's like, what's going on? Then she just sort of casually flexes inward. They both crack their skulls against each other, and she just walks away without saying a word. I swear, you like, the only thing that would be better had she just put on sunglasses and just walked away like thug life. They have a lot of characters with a lot of like, oh, they're quirky characters, but they have room for personality. They're not generic. You know what I'm saying?
I think so.
Like, Katyusha is, the reincarnation of Lolly Stalin, but well, she's the lolly reincarnation of Stalin. I suppose it would make more sense.
Yeah.
But in the show proper, she sort of like shows up riding on top of Nona, insults the main characters, eats, takes a nap, wakes up, loses, starts to cry. But there's enough of a shell of a personality there that you can fill in some of the blanks yourself, and the rest can be filled in by supplemental materials. With High School Fleet, the characters are so generic that I was about to say, like, you can't, like, fill them in, but I'm trying to think of one, and again, there's the scientist lady, there's the one girl with white hair who really knows how to handle a light anti-aircraft gun. Torpedo girl, main character, gypsy cursed lady, German woman.
Yeah, because I'm thinking about it right now, and I mean, admittedly, I've watched a little bit more Girls in Panzer than I have High School Fleet, but I haven't paid as much attention to Girls in Panzer as you have.
Yes.
Right? But even so, I can think of any given character. I don't remember their names, but I can imagine what they look like and what like their thing is in my head. I can't remember anything from High School Fleet.
Yeah, it's just the more or less the point I was going. Like, Darjeeling is British and like, oh yes, must be proper Victorian. Yes. Maho's actually Maho's like an actual character because she's Miho's sister. Miho, actual character. Yukari, Mako, Hannah, that's her name. I just remember her as the girl who eats a lot, and that's another thing that I should mention. Girls in Panzer also shows you without telling people's character traits. At no point do they ever state that Hannah is a big eater. At no point does someone ever go, wow, you sure do eat a lot. It's just that in the background, whenever the characters are getting food, she has like twice as much as anyone else. Like it's blink and you'll miss it. She's always ordering like food for two people and eating it herself. That's how we know she's a big eater. They show us. They don't tell us. They show us. Yukari, her room is an interesting bit of character. Just the stuff around it, because her like lonely, friendless background, and her weird obsession with Miho. Did I mention that Girls in Panzer isn't afraid to take the piss? Because Girls in Panzer isn't afraid to take the piss. The show with the alien, or they're not even aliens, I don't think. The show with the mutant hamsters spreading rage virus. attempts to be serious. It's stupid as hell, but they're like, oh, we must be serious. We must stop them from like bombarding things and killing people and potentially a war. I don't know. Don't remember. Girls in Panzer. Yeah. We're saving our school. Tournament arc, standard stuff. And now the French are rioting. Because when aren't the French rioting? Sorry, just the picture of the French school. Like, all the students whip out riot gear. start beating the shit out of each other with loaves of bread. I'm pretty sure that riot was also started over food in the first place.
Yeah, that makes sense. Sounds pretty French.
Something I wanted to mention that I kind of danced around this whole time. Girls in Panzer is grounded in its storytelling. Like, again, their goal is always simple. Save the school. And then save the school again. And then for Das Finale, which is the end of Urai's story, it's not even that. It's just like, hey, this one character who, like, is even particularly, like, nice. Like, she can't get into college because her family's super dirt poor. So, like, we need to get her an athletic scholarship. That's literally the plot. It's like a 6 OVA like movie series, Das Finale. It's literally just like getting one of the characters an athletic scholarship.
Yeah, very very simple motivations to all of the plots in Girls in Panzer.
They kind of make sense though. I mean, for characters in high school, I mean, normal despite what anime may have us believe, normal high schoolers usually don't have to worry about saving the world from evil viruses or aliens attacking or like ancient vampire races. Their problems usually involve like, oh shit, like high school stuff.
And in the case of sports anime, well, I suppose for sports anime, it's a lot more. Actually, sports anime in general are a lot more grounded, I think, because it's usually related to whatever sport is being played in the show, and that's where most of the drama comes from for the dramatic ones, or the comedy for the comedic ones. So if you structure it like a sports anime, then yeah, you can get a lot of mileage out of what if girls had tanks.
You can get a shocking amount of mileage out of it. The point that I've been trying to make this whole time, I brought it up before, is spectacle. I've actually been trying to stop using the word action to describe things.
Okay.
Because I realized that action has a lot of forms. So it's like, oh, like you don't like action films? There's so many different types of action films that saying you don't like action films is kind of a misnomer.
Okay.
Fundamentally, the way I see it, action revolves around spectacle. Like, you're not, like, watching John Wick go completely ballistic over his dog is spectacle. You're enjoying watching him have sword fights on motorcycles through the tunnels of New York City. Because it's a spectacle. You know, him putting a pencil through the brain of somebody is a spectacle. Commando, watching Arnold Schwarzenegger gun down like 80 people and throwing a steam pipe through a guy to rescue his daughter is spectacle. Die Hard, you know, John McClane roughing it, running around. I was going to say doing Die Hard things, but Die Hard literally wrote the book on Die Hard things. It's spectacle.
Okay.
Spectacle is good. I like spectacle.
Or should we say maybe spectacle isn't bad? It's like it's a neutral thing. You can use it for good or ill.
Yes. The problem with spectacle is that it wears off. I was not particularly as enamored with the third John Wick movie because I'm like, yeah, like the whole plot is interesting and everything, but I mean, how much more are you gonna go? Like, the dude went to freaking Morocco to be like the original Assassins, and which I'm pretty sure may be combining the canon of Assassin's Creed and John Wick. You know, he went and almost died in the desert and chopped off his finger and fought a bunch of people with weird armor stuff. Like, how much more are you gonna go? Like, there's an upper limit to where you can go with this. Things are just gonna keep escalating. Girls and Pens are like, yeah, you can ramp a tank off another tank to blow up a friggin' 600 millimeter siege gun. But where does it stop? You're gonna get an even bigger siege gun? You're gonna get the friggin', was it the Gustav gun? Is that the one that's 80 centimeters? 800 millimeters?
So.
You're gonna grab that one next? You're gonna stretch the definition of tank even more? Like, they had the mouse as, like, the big boss of the main series proper. Well, you're gonna get the rat? The one that's even bigger than that? The one that's the size of, like, the biggest piece of Earth move equipment on the planet? Girls and Panzer, I almost didn't want to watch the second part of Das Finale, because the first episode or whatever, for some reason it didn't grab me, and it wasn't until much later that I realized that it was almost all spectacle, to say. Then I watched the second one, and it pulled me back in because it showed us Miho and Alice, you know, interacting, you know, continuing after, like, the movie, you know, their whole, like, friendship there. It showed us what... I don't even remember the character whose name that they're trying to get the sports scholarship. Like, there's characters with so many similar names, because it's like Miho, Maho, Mako, Miko, Momo. Momo's the one. Got it in like 5. They show her what her, like, actual, like, home life is. They show us, like, oh, here's her family, here's her brothers and sisters, her parents. Like, why do we care that she, you know, gets a sports scholarship so she can go off to a good school?
So what you're saying is giving context to spectacle.
Yes, giving context to spectacle. I mean, I remember quite clearly in Das Finale Part 2 when the one French girl friggin' ninja, like, backflipped her way onto a tank. That was cool. I don't remember anything from the first one. I'm not saying there wasn't even action there, it's just I wasn't engaged, so I didn't remember it.
I think part of this comes back to a couple episodes ago we talked about Old Noah Zero and Urabuchi's work, Gen Urabuchi, and how there's the contrast of hope and hopelessness in some of his works. And so it kind of comes up here as well, where contrasting the calm context to spectacle makes the spectacle mean more, and it makes it more memorable.
Yes,
I
think you're pretty right there.
Yeah, so I suppose we could probably formulate some kind of general rule of contrast in media, where contrast brings out a lot of really big things in each thing that's being contrasted. It's sort of like food, sort of like cooking, where you'll put something, a contrasting flavor into the dish to bring out the first flavor even more. Sort of thing.
Yes.
Like sweet and sour or sweet and salty. Doesn't seem like it should work, but it does.
No, I like to alternate fistfuls of M&Ms and potato chips. With Girls and Panzer, there are so many characters. I have not even touched on all the characters. There are so many characters. They introduce more characters each time. They introduced pirates for Das Finale. There are pirates now as part of their tank team.
Oh yeah.
Also, they went plumbing into, like, the bowels of the depths of their aircraft carrier, because, as it turns out, like, I think it's like 10.5 kilometers, so I think that's like 7 miles. As
Something
it
like
turns
that.
out, 7-mile long ship has a lot of interior volume that isn't all going to be used for like normal stuff. Like you can get very easily lost. Yukari, I think her explicit words where she compared it to the bad parts of Johannesburg, which, no offense to the people of Johannesburg, I'm fairly certain your city has no good parts to it. So, yeah, they get attacked by pirates inside the ship. They kidnap one of the girls for like the student morals committee. They have to go on an adventure through the dungeon of the ship. Also, there's a literal dungeon underneath in the ship somewhere. Don't know when they installed it or why they installed it, but there's a dungeon in there. Also a bar for pirates. They get into a brawl with the pirates. Yukari pulls a hand grenade out of nowhere, and knowing Yukari's character, it's entirely probable it was a live hand grenade that she was prepared to blow everyone up with.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And they end up recruiting some of the pirates to pilot like a Mark 8 tank, like a Mark 8 land ship, like from World War One. One of those. They hire pirates. They've stick a mast and sails on it too.
How appropriate that pirates would pilot a land ship.
There was I'm just remembering the Ferris wheel scene from the movie. They shoot a Ferris wheel, and like now there's a Ferris wheel running around. They're having to dodge it in their tanks, drifting around, shooting at each other. There's tanks on the roller coaster riding it like roller cars, shooting at each other. Girls in Panzer is dumb as hell.
But it's a lot of fun.
It's a lot of fun.
And it's pretty well put together.
Like I said, Girls in Panzer. Octus is doing this weird thing with their properties, because I said their only other property that they're like doing stuff with is Princess Principal.
Yeah.
Because like Princess Principal came out in 2017, and then it's like between then and now, the only things they've released is something for Princess Principal else and like more Girls in Panzer. Which, fair on them. If you're gonna make more of something, Princess Principal is pretty decent thing to make more of. They're doing this weird thing where instead of like making proper second seasons, they're making 6-part like movie miniseries, where like hour-long OVAs. For both Princess Principal and Girls in Panzer.
I mean, technically, isn't that the equivalent of another season, strictly speaking?
More or less, yeah.
It is still weird, though.
It is weird because like each one is like self-contained. Well, I haven't seen the Princess Principal one because it got delayed so heavily because of COVID that it ended up coming out just this year in Japan, and it still needs to come to like America.
Yay.
But it took them. There was a 2-year gap between DOS Finale Part 1 and Part 2. Part 3 is coming out this year, which is another 2-year gap. So I'm like, is it take you 2 years to make 2 episodes of this show? It's kind of worth the wait, but...
Yeah.
But yeah, so Girls in Panzer, they're doing this weird, like, 6-part continuation thing. So DOS Finale is the end of Urai's story, the school that we're following for like the main plotline this entire time, and that's actually kind of one of the themes of the I don't want to say like second season, but of DOS Finale is how all the characters are like starting to move on. Like that's why she needs a college scholarship, is because she is graduating and going to college. She's not going to be in this high school anymore. Like, you got Erica sitting around, one of the German kids, sitting around, like, as a total sad loner. It's been like, I just imagine her sitting there listening to emo music the entire time because Maho's going to Germany to go. Like I said, the whole point of like why they theme their schools is for like international schooling. But she's going to Germany for college, so Erica's just all sad. Darjeeling's moving on. It's gonna be, people are still asking like, is it gonna be Pico who takes the spot? Or is it gonna be Rosehip? That's gonna be interesting. I want to see Pico leading Saint Gloriana's. Just all the characters are moving on. Katyusha is going to Russia for school, and she still doesn't speak any Russian. That's a running gag in Girls and Panzer. The fact that the commander of the Russians doesn't speak any Russian. But the DOS finale is supposed to be like the end of an era for Girls and Panzer and the beginning of a new one. And again, because they managed to balance spectacle and character so well, I think it's gonna survive losing its main cast, more or less.
You gotta hope.
You gotta hope. I mean, one of the initial complaints I had with part 1 of DOS finale, which I didn't quite realize why I had this problem with it until later, was I'm like, so they're fighting the French school, and the whole is like, oh, we gotta like, fighting the French school, French stuff, blah 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 blah. Like, can we have the French school be the protagonist? Because they're like the scrappy underdog in this. Like Urai, like they won. Like that was the thing. They won the tournament at the end of the series. They won the tournament in the movie. They've won. They're not the underdogs anymore. And they managed to refocus it with like, they managed to refocus it on the characters rather than the the action or the school itself. But I initially was complaining about like the French school not being like the main characters, but I'm thinking they were able to they will introduce other interesting characters who could easily take the place of Urai. Makes me think they have the ability to do it.
Well,
they didn't do it this time, but they could.
Next time. Yeah, certainly next time it won't just be another ragtag underdog team who has to save their school by winning a tournament of tankery. They wouldn't do that for the 3rd season, right?
No, I don't think so. I mean, there's a lot of interesting things to explore in this universe. I kind of want to see Alice be like one of, maybe not necessarily the main character of like a 3rd season, but I definitely want her to be in it. Alice she's from the movie. She was introduced there. She is the epic prodigy of Sencha-Do is what they call it. Sencha-Do, or Tankery if you do it the American way, like the American localization, or Panzerfahren if you're one of the weird fan translators that insists on making everything randomly German. She's so skilled at the art of Sencha-Do that as a child she was allowed to skip all the grades and go straight to college, where she joined the like a college tankery team. And then of course there's the OVA, in which is like, hey, so as it turns out, you can't just randomly have a 12-year-old go to college, so she has to actually like go back and like do some of the normal grades. she's like, yeah, you have to go back and at least get like a high school diploma or something. So she joined high school for like DOS finale, so I'm pretty sure she's a freshman. So just saying, she could be an important character. She's interesting. She's kind of funny.
Okay, here's an idea. Alice as like the mentor character to the new main characters in season 3.
I'd buy that. Yeah, I think that's a good ending point. Girls in Panzer, excited for the future. High School Fleet had a movie, actually.
How was it?
I don't know. I haven't seen it. It's not legally available in America, to my knowledge.
Fun.
And we at Anime Stroganoff cannot legally advocate breaking the law. Also, I just haven't bothered to see it, like, wherever. I don't care.
Technically, we are under no obligation to say that you shouldn't quote-unquote illegally quote-unquote download quote-unquote the movie from quote-unquote streaming sites. But to each their own.
I do know that I did watch the OVAs. The OVAs for High School Fleet are... there were two of them I literally cannot remember. They so blended together in my mind, again, because they're kind of generic. So at the slight spoiler alert for High School Fleet, it doesn't matter, you're not going to watch this show. Their destroyer, after all the punishment and abuse it took over the course of the main series, sinks at the end, and it's all sad. I'm like, it sank in harbor, right? Like, you can just, like, raise it, like people do with ships. In the OVA, they actually, like, do raise it, but only to scrap it, because there is a huge gash in the waterline. I'm like, oh yeah, you're not fixing that. Also, how did it get home? If it took that much damage, these kids should have been swimming home. But then they're all like sad. It's like, oh no, if we don't have a ship, then we'll be kicked out of the high school. And they're like, that's not how school works. No, we're just gonna get you another one. We get these things out of a vending machine.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Alright, well, that's about it for today.
That is about it for today. Any strange people out there who also watch Girls on Panzer? Tell us about it on the Discord.
Yeah. And if you've watched High School Fleet, you have our condolences.
You have my condolences. It's not even that it's bad, it's just kind of painfully generic and slightly boring at times.
Doesn't that make it even worse than worse, though?
Kinda, yeah.
Yeah. Well, in any case, I have been Lilith.
And I have been Eli.
And this has been Anime Stroganoff.